The topic here today, cracking the code, family conversations about estate planning. And let's reframe how we think about this and how we talk about estate planning, because it's truly extraordinary what we can accomplish when we communicate. That's really what this is all about. So we're here to think about how we can achieve extraordinary things. And here are the topics we're going to cover here today. And Mike, do you want to go over these?
Sure. I've already alluded to them in my introductory comments, but the idea is to rethink the whole concept of communication within the family when it comes to these vitally important issues. So we're going to talk a little bit here about how to introduce the topic. What are some simple tools and techniques? When should you do it? Sooner the better, I'll tell you that right now, but when should you do it? What's an opportune time? How can you make it as comfortable as possible for everybody? And certainly we're going to talk about what the topics are. What are the issues that most people should address? Always acknowledging that every family has unique issues. Every family is different. So how are the kids going to raise it with the parents? How are the parents going to raise it with the kids? Other family members. It's often necessary, important to involve grandparents, aunts, uncles. Again, it's family stuff. Why communication is so key for long-term care, for tax planning, everything. If you can integrate all of the thinking and all of the documents, obviously it's much better. So for the adult children, what are the topics you should raise with your parents and why? Certainly we'll get into tax issues, but again, it's family comfort as well as financial rewards that everybody will enjoy if this process is pursued. So we're excited, a lot to cover here today. And by the way, we encourage questions. I assume, where should folks click, Mark, if they want to insert a question?
Yeah, they should use the Q&A function in the Zoom format. So it's very easy to submit questions. We're going to get to some questions at the end. So we're really excited to go through. I mean, this is such an important topic. We're going to try to make this as conversational as we can. And I'm sorry for any technical difficulties we had earlier. And hopefully you guys can all see the slides. At least we're trying new setups. It's always a bit of an adventure. So let's jump into some topics. And for those of you who don't know us, let's tell you about our firm. We are Gilfix and the Pole Associates. We have over 40 years of experience in this field. Obviously based in Palo Alto, California, but we serve clients really throughout the state of California. And our legacy is pretty extraordinary. We work with thousands and thousands of families, and our goal is to provide extraordinary peace of mind and, of course, return on investment. And we've been featured in the national media. Mike just had a couple articles in national magazines. In the past, I've had some in national magazines. We're in the media regularly. You cut me out. And myself. Okay. And we're very proud of our heritage, and we write books on this. So this is really what we're all about. We've written books about estate taxes, about special needs planning, and of course about long-term care as well. So Mike and I co-authored 2 books, Special Needs Trust Creation and Management Guide and Facing the Reality of Long-Term Care. Mike also authored a book, Beat Estate Tax Forever. So we live and breathe these topics. We think about them all the time. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because it's important to understand these. Where does the rubber meet the road? It's when you communicate with your family. And that's what's so important. And that's what we're here to talk about today. I want us to reframe communication about estate planning. I think it's broken, the way that we think about talking about estate planning and tax planning and long-term care planning. And I have a big pet peeve. I hate the term estate planning. Mike, I think you agree with that, right? We hate the term estate planning.
Whoa, forever we're hated.
Hate it. Because what do you picture when you hear the term estate planning? You probably get an image that's something like this. It's an estate. This is some British estate. I don't know where it is. But who has an estate? Like, we don't have estates. We have maybe a home, maybe you have a condo, maybe you have savings. We have hopes and dreams, but we don't have an estate. And what do we think of when we think of estate plan? We think of the reading of the will. Someone passes away and the lawyer comes out, and it's in all these movies, and they read the will, and sometimes a recording of the deceased parent telling everyone what they get. And that's just not how this should be. It should not be put in a drawer and taken out when the worst case scenario happens. We need to plan ahead. This is not the way that we should think about this. This is not the way we should talk about it. It should be talked about ahead of time. We hate the common misconceptions and the way that people think about estate planning, how they think about communicating about it. It's terrible. So let's reframe this. Estate planning is a horrible term, and really we think it should be reframed. This is about family empowerment. It's about creating the legal tools to carry out your hopes and dreams. And Mike, anything you'd add to that?
Well, my concept of what we do is very different, consistent with what Mark was saying. What we do is we take care of families. Estate planning, it's cold, it's sort of objective, and what we do is so subjective. Again, it's integrating tools that make things better for families with real life people. What's your family situation? Again, what we do is we take care of families, and that's the term. I wish we had that term. We use it, but generically, that's not what is used. So again, reframing things, so critical.
Let's jump into our first topic here today. The how, the when, the what to communicate about estate planning. Let's talk about parents talking with adult children. So I think the appropriate person to talk about this subject is Michael Gilfix, my father. So why don't you go through how we talk about it, when we should talk about it, and what we should talk about? Just a few topics.
So yeah, we have done this. So I'll just say we have 3 kids. We try to be very open with them. Not about everything, hey, not about everything, but we certainly want them to know what the concept is. So, how do you initiate that? The dream is you sit down and you have a very simple, very direct talk. You basically say, look, we've done our planning. It affects you guys. It's your future as well as ours. Let's just talk about it so you know what we envision and the roles that you may be playing as things move along. So it can be very comfortable and very casual. Now, for many people, that's not the case. You don't feel comfortable doing that. Another tool that I think works very well is rather than say, I want to talk about this because I'm worried about it, you say, we have a trust, or we got this letter from the lawyer and it talks about all of these issues. And I thought it would be good to really look at this with you. So you're deflecting it. You're not making it, I'm worried about this, I'm concerned about this, but here's what the lawyer said.
So using
documents that we have in place.
Using us as the excuse. We have many clients, I think, who use meetings with us as their excuse for talking about it. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, we've recommended that forever, that, blame the lawyer. If you don't really want to talk about this, you want to blame the lawyer. And by the same token, on many occasions, we facilitate that parent-child discussion. Parents come in with their kid or kids, and we set the agenda, we facilitate, but it's really to facilitate a discussion between parent and child. So, we know that there are hesitations that you have. Many of us feel very private about these issues. You may be concerned that your kids are going to have to confront the fact that they're going to lose their parents, that they're going to inherit a lot of money. You may be worried if they're going to lose their motivation to work, that they're going to be trust babies. These things come up, but putting your head in the sand is just not a solution. You may have hesitations because there's issues in the family. Again, this doesn't work for everybody. We know that. We're not idealizing or closing our eyes to reality. There may be issues in the family. Some of the kids don't get along. One kid is estranged. There's a concern about a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, whatever. It isn't always easy. We acknowledge that. But I strongly recommend that these barriers, these issues should not stop you from taking these steps. You need to involve the next generation. So we recommend that you share your documents. By the way, if you share your basic plan, you have a trust. Whatever you've done, that does not always mean that they know how much you have. Again, many say, I don't mind letting them know what the basic plan is. I really don't want to let them know how much I have, where it is. That's up to you. That's very individual. We really get that. So it doesn't always work. You have to be careful. We have to be sensitive to the realities in the family, but as direct as you can be is probably the key in making it comfortable and casual. Finding tools that will make it easier for you to raise these topics.
And I would actually just add, actually on the topic of how much you have, Well, I think we live in a day and age where there's more visibility about that. I mean, adult kids are not dumb, right? Like we get an idea of this. Now, we have some clients who are very secretive and they probably have done a very good job of kind of guarding it over time. We have some clients who live in very, very average looking homes who happen to have tens of millions of dollars in the bank. But adult children these days, or even younger children, they know how to Google the Zillow value for your home. And if you have other properties, they're not blind to this. And they can kind of, and we see financial statements and things like that, where if you're not very careful. So generally speaking, I do think a little more visibility is, but not financial statements maybe, but you get an idea just from conversations and things like that. It's very case by case specific, but I think we live in a day and age where there's more visibility than ever. It's just a topic that I think.
Absolutely. And in a moment, I'm going to talk about the topics, what to discuss. But what Mark said is really important, that the kids know a lot. You may think they don't have a sense of what you have, but of course they have some sense. And particularly if one or more of them are going to play some role in managing things for you if you're ill, all of these things have to come together. So when should you have this discussion? Well, as soon as possible. That's for sure. You may be waiting for a kid to mature a little bit more if you're a younger parent. Of course, again, no, it's not a one size fits all. Now, if significant steps are going to be taken in your planning, perhaps you're creating an entity like a limited liability company, and you're going to involve the kids as members. Well, they have to become a part of that, of course. If there are health issues that come up, that's when you absolutely have to have that discussion. Who's named in the advance directive to be your healthcare decision-making agent? How does it impact your other planning? Again, the kids are going to feel this develop, and they should know how the planning fits together. It's going to give your kids a lot of comfort, and I think strengthen them and strengthen the relationship. So as to when, the sooner the better. Find tools that make it easier for you. Now, what should be discussed? This list could never end, but let's go through some of the more obvious. Number one, who's going to be the trustee? Ideally, you will have chosen one or more of your kids, and if not, somebody else, that's fine. There's no rule that it has to be your kids. But who's going to play what role? Who's going to be the trustee? Who may be named in the advance directive? Healthcare decision-making can be different. So it isn't always one kid is going to be doing absolutely everything. Maybe you've set up trust for the kids, and who's going to be the trustee? Best that they should not be surprised by what happens.
Yeah.
That's just not a good thing generally. The distribution plan. Should you tell them who's going to get what? Well, if it's simple and everybody's getting an equal share, perhaps that does make it easier, and you say that if that's the case. Being careful, by the way, your trust controls assets that are in the trust. You may have retirement assets that are not controlled by the trust. So just be cognizant that for a moment here, I'm really focusing on the trust, the planning that we would typically do for you. So on the issue of the distribution plan, you may not be leaving everything in equal shares to the kids. And if you're not, it's particularly important that they know that it's your decision and why you did it. You don't want to leave a legacy of anger between the kids. So if they don't hear it from you, so they know that it's your decision and why, they can blame each other after you're gone. And that would be, a really terrible, terrible thing. Many parents want their kids to have a house or something secure. And maybe they favor one kid over another. Maybe one kid is rich, one kid is really poor. One kid has values you really like, one kid has values you really don't like. Hey, it's your money, mom and dad. It's our money. So we get to decide what makes sense for us. But again, we don't like the idea. I think it's self-evident. Not good to have the kids surprised about what you do. They should know in advance, not all the details, but take responsibility for the decisions that you're making.
Surprises are bad when it comes to estate planning. That people worry about family conflicts. They worry about one kid getting mad at the other. That usually happens when there's no communication ahead of time. Surprises lead to conflicts. I think that's actually a really important way to think about this. Not that every family, and actually, Mike, why don't you bring up just the issue of, we recommend that families talk about this, but a lot of families, maybe there's some strained relationships, maybe communication isn't so good. So this isn't a one size fits all approach, right?
Yeah. It's like this aspect of the work that we do is arguably more counseling than legal, right? Because we're talking about how you're going to work things up in the family. Uh, if you're going to do something unique out of the ordinary, again, can't overemphasize taking responsibility for it. We have so many stories. We're not going to go through any of them today. Where again, as Mark mentioned, if there's a surprise, somebody gets really angry, and that's when they might want to challenge what you've done. God forbid. And then you're in court. I mean, that's the worst thing ever. So the more they know in advance, let them gripe in advance to you, not to their siblings after you're gone. And by the way, if you're making any significant charitable bequests, I think that's a good thing to tell your kids about, so that they know, so that they don't have an expectation that they're going to get everything when in fact they're not. Yeah. It all goes again to keeping everybody in the loop. Another major issue is health care planning. What if you want to age in place and stay at home? That could cost an enormous amount of money. So what role are the kids going to play? Do you envision one of them giving you care at home? Probably not, but that comes up all the time. What if you learn through discussions that one of your kids vehemently disagrees with something you've said in your advance directive about end-of-life planning? This doesn't come up often, but when it comes up, it's a huge deal. It's good. You need to know if you have a kid, for example, who may object to whatever decisions you're making for religious reasons, whatever reasons there may be, and there are ways we can address that to reduce the possibility of conflict down the road. Tax planning. My goodness, if there's any area where multi-generational planning comes into play, it's tax planning. We talk a lot about Proposition 19, the desire to keep the house and other property in the family. You have to involve your kids if we're going to do proactive planning to avoid the horrific outcome of this new property tax law here that we have in California. So it's got to be discussed, got to find out, do the kids want to keep the house in the family? If so, one kind of planning makes sense. If they're going to sell it after you're gone, a different kind of planning makes sense. So knowing what your kids' wishes are, what their plans are, you raising it with them, that will guide a lot of the planning that you do. Isn't this self-evident? These issues are just below the surface. We kind of know they're there, but putting them on the table, such a service we'll be doing for everybody. If you are creating trusts to hold assets for the benefit of your kids, let your kids know. We always recommend these dynasty trusts, we call family protection trusts for your kids, which means your kids are not going to inherit anything directly. Well, that's a good thing. They're going to control the money. It's protected. Let them know. If there's a special need situation in the family, everybody knows, but let them know what the structure is, how it's going to operate, what a special needs trust means and what it does. And, we have our book that explains all of this if you do have to add it.
Yeah, and I'll just and often
that retirement.
Yeah, we have many clients will use attorney meetings with us though to do this, to have these discussions. So just to add, for all of these, you have the family talk at home, but we have many clients who we have a peace of mind program. If you're an existing client, you're probably aware of that. For people who want to stay in regular touch with us, they'll meet with us every year, and they will often bring in their kids from wherever their kids are. Zoom, easy, and they'll have those family meetings to go over a lot of this where we can help frame it. But I think it's just so important that we all talk about. I think that's the thing that's coming through for me as you talk about it. It's an endless list of topics that we can and probably should talk about. But the key, and I think I just want to make this so clear, is that we should talk about this whenever possible. Conflict will happen if you don't. If you're worried about, oh, these are touchy subjects, they're going to get more touchy if you don't talk about them. So any final thoughts before we move forward to the way that kids should talk to parents?
No, I'm very curious, Mark, to see what you're going to say here.
Yeah. Well, I think the bottom line here, just from my perspective, is, again, I think framing the talk, it should really be about positivity, hopes and dreams, and getting everybody on the same page. Any other thoughts just last minute? I think one thing I would add about good times to do this can be around the holidays sometimes, having like family meetings to reflect on where you are, to have gratitude for what you have, and to talk about this. I think family holidays are also great times where everybody's there in person. So I think in person is always better if we can do that. So wonderful stuff. And we'll circle back to some of the topics that Mike talked about and why it's so important to talk about tax planning and other issues around this and why that can save millions of dollars. Our next topic here, the how, the when, the what, of communicating about estate planning, but let's talk about this from an adult child to parents perspective. Hopefully your parents are still around, depending on what your age are. And what do we need to talk about for us adult children? We need to talk to our parents about this. And here's how we're framing this: that how can we initiate and frame this talk? When is a good time to do it? And what are the critical topics that we should bring up? So I think the key when we talk about, so first of all, again, we need to reframe the idea of estate planning. This is much more about family empowerment planning and protecting all that we work so hard for planning. I hate the term estate planning. I hope we made that clear. How do we initiate these conversations as the kids talking to our parents about it? Well, here's how not to do it. Hey, mom and dad, what am I gonna get when you're gone? I kind of need to know, like, am I gonna get the house? Like, I want to know what I'm gonna get, just so I just want to know. Tell me what I'm gonna get. That's a terrible way to do it. It shouldn't be about you. The first thing I would advise is it has to be about your parents first, and then about the family as the whole. And it should be framed around hopes and dreams and wishes and fears. What are you worried about, mom and dad? How can we make sure that we have a plan that we're communicating together to make sure your worst fears don't happen? Is your worst fear that you have to go live in an assisted living facility and can't get taken care of at home? Is your worst fear that we don't understand what we're inheriting and we're going to waste it all, and we're not going to handle it the right way, or that we're not going to honor your charitable goals? What are your fears? What are the things that keep you up at night? And let's talk about what your hopes and dreams are on the other side of that. What are your goals for your own journey, the last stages of your life, the next stages of your life? What are your visions and goals for your kids, for my generation and for the next generation, your grandkids? And that's a wonderful way to frame it, because again, that gets us out of the selfishness and the awkward talk of what am I going to get? And it makes it much more about shared visions and dreams. So I think that's how we need to reframe this. As adult children bringing this up with our parents, we do need to talk about it, but it doesn't have to be about dollars and cents. You don't have to ask, how much do you have, mom and dad? Now, if you know it's a larger estate, we may need to think about estate tax planning. But a lot of the steps that parents take are really there for the benefit of the kids. They don't affect themselves that much. It's if you create a dynasty trust, or if you do, it's property tax planning. That's not about the parents. It's about the kids. So it's really important we bring these up. But again, it shouldn't be framed about what we're getting. It should be framed around shared hopes and dreams. Now, when is a good time to do this? Well, I think one thing, any major family event, a major health problem, if there's a health scare for a parent or a health scare for a child, we have many adult children. We have our own health problems at times. That's a good time to bring this up. The birth of a child, or a grandchild, that's a wonderful time to bring it up. It's a good excuse, because it's really important to talk about these issues at those times. So whenever there's a crisis, a health issue, a new birth, and I think family holidays, when everybody's gathered together, I think it's a great idea generally to have moments where you talk about gratitude and what you're all thankful for. That also can be a great segue into having family discussions around your estate plan. But again, don't use the word estate plan. Let's talk about our legal plan as it pertains to our shared hopes and dreams, and as it pertains to empowering each other to help each other out. Now, what do you need to talk about? I mean, the topics can be endless, but I think Mike has alluded to this before. But one is your successor trustee. Are you named am I the adult child? Hey, mom and dad, let me take a step back. The first question I would ask is, do you have an estate plan? Because if you don't, that's a big problem. If mom and dad don't have an estate plan, who's going to be dealing with the mess that's created? It's the adult children, right? They're going to be the ones having to go to court to get court orders or conservatorship to get the power to help mom and dad if they need it. They're going to be the ones stuck in court with probate because mom and dad didn't have a properly designed living trust. They're going to be the ones who don't have any asset protection, who face massive tax bills down the road. So we're going to be the ones picking up the pieces if there isn't an estate plan. So the topic is, do you have an estate plan? I think that's absolutely critical. Now, if you're a client of ours, hopefully everybody has an estate plan. But two, if mom and dad do have an estate plan, hey, who's named as trustee? Is it me? Am I going to be stepping in next? Or have you thought about this? Did you set up the plan many years ago? Is it up to date? Did you name a friend who's no longer even around? We have a lot of clients who they set up their plan years ago. Their kids were still young. Their kids aren't even named as trustees, but the kids get older. They're responsible. Maybe it makes sense to name the kids now. So let's talk about who's named as trustee. Do you have a trust? Who's named in it? Am I part of this? What are your hopes and dreams, mom and dad? What do you want when it comes to long-term care? By the way, when you talk about long-term care and the need for making sure that you're well taken care of down the road, you might have to talk about finances. You might have to talk about what you have in the way of bank savings, investments, and all that. Anything you'd add here, Mike, to setting the stage before we go to more like asset protection and tax planning? Any other topics you think that adult children should ask their parents about, just kind of setting the stage?
I think what I want to do is emphasize what you said, because I so appreciate what you said about hopes and dreams. It's just not that common for kids to ask their parents about that. There's assumptions made so often, and those assumptions don't always mesh with reality. And it also forces the parents, as you, Mark, actually forced me and your mom to do, to think about our hopes and dreams. Because, you coast along, you're feeling good, you're not ill. And it is good to think these things through, but it doesn't come up naturally. So finding a pathway to make the parents think about what they want were, challenging thoughts, right? And then how to communicate those to the kids and getting the kids on board. That's just rare. That's just rare. So it's been of enormous benefit in our family. I'll just say directly. And we want to share that positive experience with all of you.
Yeah, and I had to actually almost not pull it out of you, Dad, but we had a conversation. We went on a little mini retreat, and I brought it up. Because it stresses me. I want to know what you want down the road, and it was really nice to have those conversations. So I can say we've had to bring this up in our own family, and it's been really a wonderful thing. And I think maybe the next holiday season, it's time to revisit that with you and Mom. So I'm excited to do that. So
years ago, I'll add this. Years ago, we did a family mission statement.
Yeah.
Many years ago. You guys were little. So now that I think back, we tackled this in a way.
Yeah.
That thing is so out of date.
It's out of date.
But maybe another message here. It isn't just one discussion.
Yeah.
Right? It isn't just
absolutely.
And you're done. It's a process.
Absolutely. And just to add to the critical topic. So we talked about, do mom and dad have an estate plan? Who's named as trustee? Has it been updated recently? But then there's the issues of what are mom and dad's hopes and dreams and fears around long-term care. But then the next stage is really talking about asset protection. So let's be honest, if mom and dad worked hard and you know that your parents have a house that they've had for a long time, or if you're fortunate enough to have multiple properties. Well, if we live in California, we need to be aware of Prop 19 and the fact that without planning, property taxes could spike by tens of thousands of dollars per year if we don't take steps to plan. And our firm, Gilfix and the Pole, we've helped hundreds of families with Prop 19 planning. We can keep property taxes low, but if you don't plan, mom and dad's hard-earned home, rental property, they might go away because we adult children might not be able to afford the property taxes if they spike up. So we have to bring this up with mom and dad. Like, hey, is it important to you that we hold on to these family properties? And we've had many adult children actually pay the legal fees for the protections to lock in the low property taxes, because again, we're the ones who benefit. It's not mom and dad who get hit by Prop 19, it's the kids. Other issues, if you have a child with special needs, if mom and dad haven't coordinated with your plan to make sure that assets go to the special needs trust, or if something happens to me as the adult child and money goes from me and via me down to the next generation, if there's a child with special needs or other issues, we need to make sure that mom and dad's estate plan is coordinated with all that we communicate. Tax planning, asset protection plan. We talk a lot about family protection trusts. We have many adult children who have paid for mom and dad to update their estate plan. So mom and dad create a dynasty trust, a family protection trust for the adult child, because I would rather the money, I don't want to inherit money directly. I want it to go to a trust that protects me from divorce, from lawsuits, and from future estate taxes, or provides a high level of protection against those things. So if mom and dad create a family protection trust for me, my inheritance has some barriers and some really powerful protections. Hey, that's a pretty good investment for me to make, to spend a little bit of money helping mom and dad's estate plan, so I'm protected for the next 50 years. At least the assets I inherit have a high level of protection. So that's another topic that we think adult children should really bring up is mom and dad, have you thought about more enhanced planning? So really crucial for adult children to talk to their parents about this. And we got a good question about other family members. Someone before the webinar, we got a couple good questions via email when people got this topic. other family members? What about aunts or uncles or siblings? And when should they be brought in? And Mike, any thoughts there?
Uh, this can be obviously more challenging. And at the same time, I think it's easier. It depends on the family circumstances. Where there is an aunt or an uncle or a godparent, if they don't have kids, and you think there's some reason to believe that they may be leaving something to your kids or to you if you are that niece or nephew, harder to have this discussion unless you're really, really close. I don't mean physically, but I mean emotionally really close to these relatives. But again, it's good to know if you can possibly raise it. The parent can have that discussion, I think, with the sibling, the aunt or the uncle of your child. And this comes up all the time when kids are surprised they inherit something, or they're surprised that they don't inherit something, and they're doing some of their life planning depends on an inheritance from Aunt Joan that they're not going to get. So coordinating it, in particular, this is important when you have a special needs child, because you may have created a special needs trust for your child who's on the autism spectrum, some other issue. And here's that Aunt Joan that I mentioned, and she's leaving $100,000 directly to that child. That can mess up eligibility for government benefits and create chaos in the short term. So making sure that they know about the planning that you've done for your kids so that they make everything fit together so that nothing comes into conflict. One of these points, again, that it's obvious once you think about it. And by the way, the other thing we don't have up here would be grandparents. Grandparents need to coordinate their planning with their kids for their grandkids.
Yeah.
We talk about 529 plans, money for education. We love these crummy trusts where you can put money into a trust for a grandkid and let it grow for decades. All these things that can be done that are ideally done from a multi-generational perspective. But again, everybody has to talk. Everybody has to talk.
Let's focus in now. Let's focus in on the topic of communicating about long-term care. And we've talked about this a little bit in other talks and earlier here, but let's think about long-term care and the specific ways that we can frame this. Because really, we won't spend too much time on this, but I think it's really important that we just spend just a moment, because this involves both generations. And many people here, raise your hand if you feel like you're part of the sandwich generation. And that just refers to someone who's taking care of parents and their kids at the same time. That's a lot of people. Parents need to talk to their kids about this, but kids also need to talk to their parents about this, because there's a huge cost associated with long-term care. Over 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will need some form of long-term care. That just means ongoing support. That can mean care at home. That can mean care in an assisted living facility. It can mean care in a nursing home. But Mike, since we've talked about this a little bit, but why don't you just go over why that's so important, how to maybe frame that? I want to spend just a little time on this subject.
Yeah, just very quickly. Look, all of us, when we get older, we think about this. We have friends who face crises, maybe somebody in our family is. So we think about these issues, right? We do. It's inevitable. It raises issues of quality of life, quality of care. Where am I going to be? Who's going to provide the care? Are you going to count on your kids for something or not? Some people feel strongly that they should. Some feel strongly that they should never do that for their kids. So again, really complicated. Asset protection. You may not want $500,000 to go out the window for a certain level of care. Many parents would rather save that money for their kids. Others say, hey, spend everything. I want to stay at home. Age in place. That's what's most important. But again, what are your goals? What are your hopes? What are the dreams? And how are you going to communicate about them? So it directly affects quality of life. And, it really gets to our dignity. We don't want to be in a facility where we are not respected. One of my biggest pet peeves is when some prestigious professor from Stanford, who's always been called Professor Jones, is suddenly called Nick, because his first name is Nicholas, by a nurse's aide in a nursing.
Yeah.
God, I hate that. I absolutely hate that.
Yeah.
So to me, Mark, write that point down. Okay, for me.
Attorney Gilfix shall be how you are referred.
That's right. I mean, that's a really important point to me. It really is respect. And it goes to quality of life. Quality isn't just physical plant stuff. It's how we feel and how we're treated. So communicating this is on many, many levels, many issues to address. And the planning that we do only addresses part of it. But again, communication about it is what's so important. So
talk about it.
We'll move on and talk about the financial side of things.
Yeah.
Because we're time is a little short here and so much to talk about. So
But let's just make sure long-term care in particular, we got to talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, it will be more expensive, it'll be worse. Talking about this is so key. Let's talk about the topics that adult children must bring up with their parents if they want to save hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And you don't need to be ultra high net worth for this to be important. If you are middle class or upper middle class, these topics are absolutely crucial. And of course, if you're high net worth, it's even more crucial. So what are some of the key topics? If you're an adult child, what do you need to talk to your parents about? If at all possible, we recognize not all families, this is possible, but if you have that decent relationship with your parents, you have to bring this up. And again, when we frame this, it should not be about, hey, mom and dad, I want you, how can we save everything for me? I want to make sure I get the most possible. It should much be more, it has to be framed around legacy. I think it's about saving what mom and dad have worked so hard for the adult child generation, but also for future generations, for kids, for grandkids, for great grandkids. We live in a very uncertain world. I think everybody's worried that artificial intelligence is going to take their job, or there's instability in the government, or the world's going to be a very chaotic place, and it is. And who knows what the economic future is going to be. So preserving family assets and minimizing those tax hits is crucial, because taxes, that's money out the window. You get nothing back for it. When you're paying higher taxes, in theory, maybe it serves better government services, but we all see that in California. More taxes does not mean better government services. So what are some of the topics we need to be aware of? Well, one, and talk to our parents about estate taxes. So the current state tax exemption is $12.92 million per person. For a couple, that's over $25 million right now that you can pass tax-free. So if you're ultra high net worth, your parents are, you got to talk about that, because we can save millions of dollars with estate tax planning. But even if you're not at that level, estate tax laws change over time. And the exemption set to drop on January 1st, 2026. It'll be cut in half. So it'll probably be around 6.5, 7 million per person. You don't know what mom and dad necessarily have. If you just own a house in the Bay Area or Los Angeles or San Diego, the house alone could get you close to the limit for a single person. If the estate tax exemption is around 6 million, 7 million a person, house in some areas, especially with inflation and home values rising, that alone could be estate tax issues. And do mom and dad really want a big chunk of what they work so hard for to go to the IRS, or would they rather it stay in the family? Asset protection. Family protection trust is a no-brainer for most families. It's a form of a dynasty trust. It's trust we've created where mom and dad don't leave a penny to a child. They leave it to a family protection trust for that child. Now, if you haven't talked to your mom and dad about this, you don't know if they've done anything for you, but it makes a lot of sense. Dad, I hope you set up a family protection trust for me. I'm happy to know that he has, because we practice what we preach. But if you haven't talked to your parents about this, we have many adult clients who will actually pay for mom and dad to create family protection trust for them. Why? Well, there's 3 big benefits. If you've seen our other talks, you know what these are. But by leaving assets to a family protection trust rather than to a child directly, there's a big protection in case you, the adult child, ever gets divorced. The assets you inherit are in a totally separate subject. They shouldn't be lost in a divorce settlement. 2, if you're ever sued, there's a barrier. It makes it much harder for someone going after your money to get the money in that trust. If you inherit directly, there's no protections. And 3, estate taxes. All or most of the assets in a family protection trust, plus the growth during your life in the value of those assets, it's not part of your taxable estate. So that's for your kids, or hey, the grandkids. That's a pretty easy topic to bring these up to frame this around. And Dad, actually, let's take it just a little aside. What about the idea when we're talking about these tax and asset protection issues, framing it around the grandkids rather than around, if you're the adult child, maybe that's a really good strategy, right? To make this less seemingly selfish. So
I think that's right. Yeah, the ultimate beneficiaries of dynasty trusts really are the grandkids, because it dramatically increases the likelihood that assets you leave your kids are going to be safe, protected, and grow without exposure to that 40% estate tax. I mean, it's punishing. So, yeah, multi-generational, parent and child. We want to look to as many generations as we can.
Yeah, and if you've seen our talks, Prop 19. Okay, we're probably California's Prop 19 attorneys at this point. I hope we are. But you need to be aware of this. Prop 19 is a new law passed in 2021, and it's not the subject of this talk, but it doesn't affect parents. it affects the next generation. And if you don't do planning, the family home might be lost. The rental might be lost because Prop 19 without planning means that property taxes for anything you've owned for a long time could spike up by 100%, 200%. We've seen some families where they could go up by 1,000% or more, like 30, 40, 50, $60,000 per year in property tax increases. We can prevent that if we work together. So that's another way, another issue that adult children have to bring up with their parents. It's so worth it. And we have adult children who have paid for the legal services to protect low property taxes. We can protect them. We work together. If you're the adult child, you're the one who's going to save the money, not mom and dad. So, hey, maybe you bring mom and dad in, but you should at least talk to them about it. Hey, mom and dad, how important is it to you that we preserve these properties you work so hard for? And then that goes to saving the family home. I've had several clients in the last few weeks who came in, and it's not just about property taxes. They're not just about saving money. It's about saving the family home. I had some clients who came in, they have a house that's worth like $5 or $6 million in Los Altos. They paid $1 million for it many, many years ago. And their daughter is an educator. And she wants to have her family live in that home when mom and dad are gone. She could not afford it if property taxes went up. End of story. She'd have to leave the area. So it's about saving that family home for the kids, the grandkids. And again, that's a wonderful way to frame it. Mom and dad, it's not about saving property taxes. How can we keep the family home in the family so we can live there, so our kids can live there? So these are just crucial topics. So I just want to pose, as an adult child, if you're the adult child, if you need to share this with somebody, these topics really affect us more than mom and dad in many cases. So it's on us sometimes to bring these up. But again, it should not just be about us. It shouldn't be about how much am I going to get. It's about preserving mom and dad's goals and dreams and preserving their legacy for future generations. And maybe make it about the grandkid, because grandkids, everybody loves grandkids, sometimes more than the kids. Any closing thoughts on this, Dad, before we wrap this up and get to some action items?
No, when you said that, I just had, the image of our grandkids. They tend to be kind of perfect, right? The kids are all screwed up, but the grandkids, they're perfect.
Yeah, there you go. So exactly. So we have to bring these up. Let's talk to our parents about this. We have to talk about this, or millions could be lost. Let's go to some action items. So communicating about estate planning. What are some action items you can take right now? Well, we offered some different ways you can think about it. But again, if it's parents talking to their kids or kids talking to their parents, this needs to be framed not around dry estate planning topics or my trust and my power of attorney. It's about your fears. It's about your goals. It's about your dreams. It's about empowering people that you love. So think about it in those terms and really identify what are your fears? What are your goals? What are your dreams? And how can communicating with your kids or your parents help to solve those problems and carry out your dreams and make sure that your dreams come true to whatever extent you can. So think about it, frame it ahead of time in positive terms. 2, set a time to discuss this. If you're the adult child, set a time to talk to your parents. Parents, set a time to talk to your children. Now, we talked about different events when this is a good time. The birth of a grandchild, a health scare, someone comes into some money, or family holidays where you come together, Thanksgiving, Christmas or Hanukkah, around the New Year's or that time of year. Whenever people are together, it's much better done in person, but we live in a time where Zoom meetings aren't so bad either. And again, make a list of topics for those. I think it can be a free-flowing conversation, but when you think about that, maybe make a list of things you want to talk about and what those specific, like who's named as trustee, what type of plan do we have in place, what tax issues do we need to be aware of, whatever it is, or what are my dreams, what are my fears about long-term care, and then just take action, have the talk. Meet with the attorney, then meet with us. We can help you with that. And as we've talked about before, having meetings with attorneys, actually, when it comes to a time to set these talks with your families, having a meeting with us or another attorney, if God forbid you don't work with us, can be a wonderful excuse to have these conversations with your family. Make us the bad guy or the good guy. Say, hey, I talked to my team at Gilfix in the poll, and they said I need to talk about this with you. That's a good use of our services. Make us the bad guy or make us the excuse to talk about this and take action. Don't sweep this under the rug. It's so much better when we communicate ahead of time. It's up to you what you reveal, what you don't reveal, what you talk about, what you don't. But it's better to talk about this than not. Anything you'd add there, Mike, before we wrap this up?
Actually, I want to comment on a question. It basically says this, my son, I've more than one kid. My son is an attorney. He believes he's going to be the trustee, but he's not. And that he'll be so upset to learn this. And basically the implicit message, I fear talking with him, he's going to be upset. So, my response is, as said earlier, better he should get angry at you than at the other kid who may become the trustee.
Yep.
Take responsibility for that so that they don't have anger and all kinds of negative feelings after you're gone. You don't want to leave that to your kids.
Absolutely. And should you meet with us, by the way, if you're an existing client or if you haven't met with us, I think it's some key issues to think about. It all feeds into communicating. Do you have an up-to-date estate plan? Has it been more than 3 or 5 years since you reviewed it? Do you know what kind of trust structure you have? An A/B trust or not trust? Do you even know what kind of trust you have? Have you revisited your backup trustees who you've named in the documents? Have you talked to your kids about this? Are they named as trustee? Are they not? Do you have a rental property or a home in California and you want to preserve it for future generations? Is your estate approaching $5 million or $10 million? You need to be worried about estate taxes. And most importantly, do you hope to protect your legacy and your assets for future generations? And do you want to make sure that your dreams and goals are carried out? So you can talk to us. So I think there's two paths. One, you have the conversation with your family before meeting with us, and then you meet with us, having this sort of list of goals and dreams, of shared goals and shared dreams, or you meet with us and use that as the excuse to talk about this with your kids and grandkids. We realize that's not possible with every family, that family dynamics don't always allow that, or at least allow open communication, but wherever possible, you should, and you should meet with us. You need to build that legal and financial team to make sure your dreams are really carried out. So think about your goals, review your assets, talk to your family, make sure you have that. We were big believers in integrated legal and financial teams. Just like families should communicate, you should have a lawyer who communicates with your financial advisors. You can think about how all these link together. We're actually building that right now, just because, again, we think communication is so important in every situation because there's no one size fits all approach. We want to build a combination of tools to make sure your dreams are carried out. We hate the term estate planning. It's not estate planning. It's about hopes and dreams planning. It's about family empowerment planning. It's about saving the house planning. That's what this really is. So we want to help you build that team. We want you to communicate within your family, and we want to be part of that team that communicates as well. And we also think, again, financial plan should be integrated with your legal plan. We're building an integrated legal financial services team, by the way. For anybody interested in learning more about that, contact us. We want you to have that. We want open communication across all lines. That's where problems are solved. Right? Think about companies that are broken or institutions that are broken. When one department doesn't talk to another, organizations fail, right? Same with families and legal planning and financial planning. When everybody's communicating and staying up to date, that's when problems are solved. That's when dreams come true. So we don't want you to be this guy. Don't keep your head in the sand. Talk to your family about this if you can. Meet with us. We can save so much for your family. You don't have to be high net worth for us to provide extraordinary value. We can save millions, even if you don't think of yourself as wealthy or high net worth. And if you are, we definitely can help you to save this. But this is about preserving your legacy, about making sure your dreams and your hopes come true, rather than putting your head in the sand and just waiting to see what happens. I just want to make a point. While Mike and I lead most of these presentations, we're a much bigger team than that. We have over 120 years, I think it's actually more than that, of combined experience. We have Nick Klingenberg, Renee Conrad, Francis LaPaul, our tax guru. So it's not just us on the team. We hope to get the chance to meet you and to meet with you. For those of you who haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can just point your phone at this and you can subscribe. It's a QR code, but we have over 64,000 views of our little videos. So thank you. Share this video, could be useful for anybody else. This will be posted to our YouTube channel, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube. And I'm launching a personal Mark Gilfix channel, by the way. But spread the word, let people know who need to know this. Maybe send this to your parents. Maybe send this to your kids. But subscribe to our channel, very easy to do. You can also just look us up on YouTube. And if you want to meet with us, very easy to do it. Our calendars do get booked up in advance, but we can always find time to meet with you to plan ahead a little bit. Gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. We're going to take just a couple questions in a second. So hang on. We have some good questions that came in. We're going to take some of those in just a moment, but easy to find us. If you do want us to reach out to you to set a meeting, you can also put your information in the Q&A function. So much we covered here today. Sorry for technical issues are always a challenge, but we got through so much here today, and I hope you got a lot out of this. I think the big picture is let's talk. Let's reframe how we think about estate planning and let's communicate about it. I think the old school ways of thinking about this can be almost toxic. Uh, Shining a light on these issues can help to solve problems. Mike, any concluding thoughts that you have before we go to some questions?
I have a recommendation, actually. We talked about how do you open the discussion. Sharing this video wouldn't that think about it? We raise the issues that we think you should think about and address with your family. So if you can get your family members to just view what we just did, there's the agenda. That opens the door to the entire discussion.
Yeah, and you'll see on our YouTube channel, we break up our webinars into shorter videos. You'll be able to find the specific topic that you want to talk about as well. So share it. Please spread the word. Subscribe to our channel. Comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Comment. Let us give us a question there as well. So now let's get to a couple of really good questions. So we have one that is, what if you have a blended family and not everybody gets along? How do you talk about these issues? What do you do then? Mike, special considerations in that situation.
Wow, I'm glad that was raised. We should have thought of that because that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
2 sets of kids. Who's going to be the trustee? Should one kid from each parent in the second marriage be co-trustees together? Usually not a good idea. Often it can work. Got to be careful. Sometimes that's a role for a professional trustee, a third party. Yeah. No one size fits all, but we're very sensitive to that issue. And you have to be too, to discuss. Usually the assets these individuals bring to the marriage are not the same. So there's an unequal potential division of the estate.
Yeah.
Misunderstandings happen all the time. I'll give a quick horror story. Recently, in a second marriage situation, dad had a lot of money, marriage of 20, 25 years. He put all of the money into a joint account with his new wife. A joint account, not in the trust that he had, which means that upon his passing, everything went to his wife. His 2 kids really had no claim. He did it intentionally, but not really understanding the implications. So unintentional outcomes by taking steps that seem logical at the time.
Yeah.
Second marriages raise all kinds of issues that we just have to address very openly.
Absolutely. Now, another really good question. What issues and opportunities should be considered if an aunt or uncle wishes to leave a retirement account to a special needs trust, or let's broaden this a little bit. What if an aunt and uncle just wants to generally help your child with a disability? How do you talk to them, and what are some considerations there? Mike, do you want to cover that?
Well, again, the presumption here is that the parents would have set up a special needs trust or taken other steps to plan for their special needs child. So the key point is really having the aunt or uncle or other individual not leave assets to that child, but to the special needs trust. So there has to be communication. Usually we would be the ones that we did the special needs trust to also take care of the aunt and uncle. But if not, if they have their own attorney, we can give them the language that their attorney can use to amend their trust so that the assets are appropriately distributed. Again, leaving money directly to an individual who has drug issues, who's incapacitated because of an accident. I mean, it creates chaos, and often it creates the need to go to court and set up a conservatorship. We want to keep everybody out of court. So educating everybody, paving the way and making sure that everyone understands what the plan is. Things get coordinated, problems avoided by the score.
And we often are asked, hey, can you send my attorney what they need to know for what I'm going to leave, what an aunt or uncle or even grandparent might leave to my child? So we can communicate about it. Let us know what those issues are, and we can help to communicate with the aunt and uncle's team or to send them what we would need to make sure that what they're going to leave for the benefit of your child is coordinated. Because I think that's a huge issue that Mike brought it up. If it's not just if it's an aunt or uncle leaving it to you, but what if your parents haven't updated their plan for a long, long time? You have a child with a disability, or a child has substance abuse issues or other issues. Most estate plans, if they don't have family protection trust, say I'm leaving money to my son and daughter in equal shares. If they're not around, it goes to their kids. And that may be okay. But if a grandchild has a special issue, whether it's special needs or something else, we need to make sure that plan is updated. So it says if it goes to the kid, they're alive, great. But if not, it doesn't go directly to the grandkids. One, we should at least probably have age restrictions so they don't get it when they're 18. And 2, there's other issues. You need to make sure their trust is named. If you create a special needs trust, we need to make sure that anybody else who might be leaving money for the benefit of that child knows about it, so their plan addresses that. So, all right. We covered so much. I think we're going to wrap it up. But thank you guys for being here. I hope you got a lot out of this. We will be getting better with the technical issues next week, I promise, for future talks. But I hope you got a lot out of this. Share this with anybody who needs to see this. And I hope this gives you the excuse to talk to your family. Even if you didn't meet with us recently, you can say, hey, well, Mike and Mark Gilfix said we need to talk about this. So we're going to talk about it. Use us as the excuse and come in and meet with us if we can be helpful to you. Of course, if you're an existing client, come back in. Let us take a fresh look at your estate plan if it's been a little while, or if this brought up any issues or questions. Let's do it. If you haven't met with us, we'd love to get to know you. We love to build and grow our wonderful client community. So stay tuned for more webinars coming up. We try to do pretty much every week, but thank you so much for joining us. As my mom likes to say, I hope everybody stays safe, sane, and healthy. Mike, any final thoughts?
I'll just emphasize that. Let's be sane and talk and embrace the good things that are going on in our lives.
Absolutely. Well, take care, everybody. We will see you next time.